Hello everyone, my name's Mark Corcoran, and along with Arthur Butler we are authors of Metal Uniform Embellishments of the Australian Army, and in this particular blog we're going to pick up where we left off in our last blog, which discussed in-service alteration of insignia during their service lifetime. In our last blog post I talked to you about a particular hat badge specimen from the Australian Army Dental Corps. In that particular case, I was talking to you about a badge which had had its lugs split to make them into a series of pins, but I didn't show you a picture of the badge in profile, so you possibly didn't get to look at the supreme precision with which the surgery was conducted. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to start this blog post by picking up where we left off when we were last discussing that item. So here you see the back of the Australian Army Dental Corps post 1953 in front of you, and you can see the base of the lug here. The lug itself has been split here and here, creating two separate pins, and the ends of that lug material has been hammered out and thinned and scarfed on the edges to make points. One side of each lug has been folded over after it's been split, leaving you with the effect of a pin, so that the item can be put through a service dress cap, brim or brow band of the time, and the work has been done because the dental personnel involved have access to the necessary tools to do this sort of fine work. In that sense, it's something of a crime of opportunity, I suppose. Moving on, we'll have a look at another Dental Corps hat badge. Here we are looking at it at the back and from the side, so you can see the two pin bases here. You can see how the pins themselves have been squashed together to form a thickish form of pin, again for it to be used on uniform or headdress items more easily than the standard lug fitting would have been able to do. We've got other examples of that sort of alteration. It's fairly common to find those amongst the badges that you will collect. Here's another example of a Dental Corps hat badge, again seen from the verso. The pin base is normal and the pin body itself has been crimped closed. So another and clearer example of that type of alteration. We can now move on to picking up the threads of a discussion that we had last time about the Central Queensland or Far North Queensland Regiment hat badge. In the post-1953 period, it's had its pins or lugs, I beg your pardon, surgically removed, and this piece of strip metal or tin of some kind has been soldered to the badge body. And in this particular photo, which is somewhat better than the photo I showed you last time, you can see these pliable pins or pliable blades which are left in place as the result of this piece of surgery. We'll have a couple of looks at that now. Here it is looking again from the back, and you can see this blade has been bent away, so you can see that they're quite springy and pliable, and obviously that particular alteration met the service needs of the particular individual who had that badge at the time. If we tip the badge back towards its face, you can see these long, flexible, pliable metal prongs have effectively replaced the lugs that the badge was issued with. Now, last time we were talking about service alteration, we discussed the bending or curvature of badges to fit certain aspects of headdress. This is a clear example of curvature along the width of the badge, and you're looking at the back of a catering hat badge, which obviously would have been worn by a warrant officer caterer on the service dress cap at that particular era of Australian Army dress, and it's been curved in this direction here to better sit on the brim of that hat. If we have a look at another photo, we can see the curvature more clearly looking at the back of the badge. There's the front of the badge, this is the back of the badge, and you can see the clear arc going from the center of the badge out to the pin, center of the badge out to the pin. And if we turn the badge over, looking at it from the bottom of the badge, these would all be in line if the badge was straight, but you can see the curvature. You can even see that the pins themselves, remaining at 90 degrees to the point where they were originally attached, have become pigeon-toed. They haven't been skewed out, they've been let. You can see them pointing towards the center of what would otherwise be a nice broad curve. So this is curvature for a service dress cap, and we'll look at other in-service alteration of that kind in a moment. In particular, we've got a fairly iconic look here at a King's Crown version of the Capricornia hat badge. So the post 48 striking of this badge, you can see the post 48 lugs in the back there. So this is the front of the badge. Back here where the lugs are is the back of the badge, and you can see these elements of the scroll work on the badge are sitting here. There's a long curve to the back of the cap of maintenance. Up at the top of the badge here describes a nice long curve. The next photo makes that even clearer, I think. Here we are looking at, this is the back of the badge, out here is the front of the badge, and you can see this long smooth curve here. Anybody who has spent time wearing a slouch hat or a khaki fur felt, if you prefer, you will know that the upturned brim has a distinct curve which straight badges do not sit on very well if they are of any height. And the last time we were discussing these things in a blog post, we discussed the particular height of the artillery insignia. Well, here is the same problem being addressed in an infantry battalion badge. You can see this curvature, and it perfectly matches the upturned brim curvature on the khaki fur felt. Going back to standard service dress alterations which you'll see in badge specimens that you pick up from time to time, here is a Ramey collar badge. Again, personnel in this corps have access to the sorts of tools necessary to make these alterations fairly neatly. Again, you'll see the lugs of this collar badge have been neatly crushed flat to create less of difficulty when trying to pierce service dress lapels and what have you to have these worn on service dress. Here's the same badge looked at from the side elevation, if you like, and you can see the lug neatly crushed flat, neatly and unceremoniously but effectively. Quite typical of soldiers' needs to alter their equipment as and when required. Here's the same picture or the same item on a 45-degree angle to give you a good close look at what people do to their insignia to make them more useful. You can ignore the blue tack down the bottom. It's obviously not part of the badge. It's just there to hold the item in place while we get the microscope grade camera in place to give you a good close look at it. Moving on now to the Sydney University Regiment. This is a fairly uncontroversial image of a complete and unaltered Sydney University Regiment hat badge. Those of you who've read the unit history or know much about it know that officers of the post 1953 and certainly the earlier period with the King's Crown cut the outer edge off this badge to leave this circular item with the crown in place, and they wore that on service dress caps for many years. We'll have a look at another image now which shows that same badge in place unaltered, and you can see this cap badge item has obviously been cut from the standard item on the right hand side. You can see the fairly unceremonious following of the outline of the cap of maintenance device in the Queen's Crown, and you can see this rounding here, which is the result of all of this material being cut away from the badge. You can see images of this badge being worn in this format in several photos which are published in the unit's history. This is the front of the badge, blackened, which is typical of Sydney University Regiment. But this particular item has had enough of the blackening worn off of it for you to be able to see the details of the insignia fairly clearly, and we've carefully overlit the badge to bring that detail out. It's not a pretty picture, but it does contain all of the information you need to recognize one of these badges when it turns up in material that you're looking at from time to time. So that's what it is, and that's who's done it, and that's what it's used for. Talking of Sydney University Regiment, here is a Sydney University Regiment band collar that has had no lugs fitted to it at any stage. The lugs would have been on the UK collar item, which would have been on the scroll work sitting under here. That scroll work's been cut away, including where the lugs would have been. The resulting cut down collar has been used by the Sydney University Regiment band in various forms for many years, and this one has had a pin soldered to the back and a hole drilled through this bar at the bottom of the design for the fitting of this security chain. This is clearly a sweetheart badge made out of a Sydney University band badge collar. If we look at the next photo, you can see the typical collar badge from the front with the security chain in place and this drill hole in the bottom of this batten so that that can be fitted. Moving on to round out some of the discussion we had previously on South Australian Mounted Rifles hat badges. This shows the saw piercings that you will sometimes find on these hat badge specimens, apparently done at unit level over the years. What might not have been obvious when we looked at this last time are the piercings between the bird's legs and its tail feathers, but this photo too doesn't do a great job of showing that. So this photo here has been included in this blog so that you can see this particular scrupulous attention to detail is present. As we said last time, you can see that the individual feathers have in fact been picked out. They've not been rounded off, they've been individually saw pierced into the design on both sides of the shrike, and here and down here between this outer border material and the bird's tail feathers and so forth. So those of you who missed out on that detail last time, we hope you find that useful. Moving on, here we're looking at the back of a standard King's Crown Capricornia hat badge in its typical gilt or brass finish. If we look at that same badge in a period chrome finish, those of you who know much about chrome can probably tell by looking at that image that you can see here this yellowing, which is associated with the underlying nickel plating over which chrome is normally laid. You can see the bluer chrome here in a proper blooming of the chrome, and this yellowing is typical, as I said, of the underlying intermediate plate of nickel, which sits on a copper substrate. Now this chrome here is quite thick, so it's not typical of any form of modern chroming, which is much more delicate and refined than this. If we tip the badge over, we can see the same fairly heavy chrome treatment, but the detail is all quite fine, and you can see this aged patina material in the lower part of the lands of the badge. That takes quite a bit of time before chrome starts looking like that, so that's quite consistent both with the thickness of the chrome and the patina. One would assume that this is quite likely to have been a period item, probably chromed for band use within the unit. If we turn the badge slightly on its side, you get a better look at this patina, this encrustation here, and you probably get a better look at the tone of the chrome as well, and you can see that the detail is beautifully fine, even though the chrome itself is quite thick. Tipping the badge over again, another look at the light, you can see this yellowing from the underlying nickel where it's not thrown near the base of these lugs, and you can see the bluish tint of the more typical chrome plating sitting on top of that. Finally, now we're looking at the webbing belt ceremonial buckle from the Royal Military College Duntroon. You can see the male element of the badge of the design here, and the female element of the badge or the belt buckle design here. When you look at this belt buckle disassembled, and even from its face, it shows a reasonable level of service alteration during its lifetime. This female element here appears to have had some surface detail machined away. It's not perfectly done, but it does seem to have been altered. If you then disassemble the badge, or in this case just turn it over, you can see that the male component of it has undergone some form of heat treatment here. Some sort of bending or what have you has been dealt with over the time. There's obviously been some form of heat treatment on the female element of the badge. Perhaps this item was bent at some stage and bent back into place. And if you take the female element of the buckle away, leaving only the male, you can see this sort of damage in here is consistent with some sort of tool work which has been done to alter the length of the throw of this buckle, or to straighten it, most likely, over the service lifetime. So this is an example of an item which has been repaired in its service lifetime. That's the end of this blog, and we hope those various service modifications are of interest and of help to you. Thank you.